Have you ever bitten into a warm croissant that seemed to melt in your mouth, so soft and flaky that you wondered what secret ingredient made it taste that way? Or maybe you've spread butter across a piece of rustic bread and noticed how some butters just taste richer, creamier, and more indulgent than others. That magic often comes down to French butter, known around the world for its unmatched creaminess and luxurious flavor. French butter is more than just a spread, it's a cultural treasure. But what exactly makes it so special? Why does it taste better than the ordinary butter you buy at the grocery store in the US? And how has it become a symbol of both tradition and culinary excellence? Let's take a journey through history, farming, science, and craftsmanship to discover how French butter earns its golden reputation. French butter stands apart for one key reason: its fat content. With about 82% butterfat, it's naturally richer than many American butters, which often hover closer to 80%. That small difference may sound insignificant, but in the world of butter, 2 percentage points change everything. More fat means less water, and less water means a smoother, silkier texture, and a flavor that clings to your taste buds in a way ordinary butter simply can't. Bakers swear by French butter because it makes croissants puffier, pie crusts flakier, and pastries practically melt in your mouth. Even on something as simple as toast, it adds a depth of flavor that feels indulgent, almost luxurious. But the story of French butter isn't just about fat percentages, it's about history, culture, and centuries of tradition. Butter has been part of European diets for hundreds of years, but in France, it carried a special weight. In the 16th century, it wasn't merely food, it was a status symbol. At feasts and banquets, wealthy families would showcase enormous golden blocks of butter on the table, not just to feed their guests, but to flaunt their prosperity. To serve butter was a statement, much like driving a luxury car or owning a mansion. Today, for everyday farmers and peasants, butter was a valuable food, but for nobles, it became a display of wealth, refinement, and taste. Yet butter's story wasn't always smooth. Religion often shaped diets, and in Catholic France, strict fasting rules during Lent forbade foods like butter. For people who couldn't imagine going without it, the Church devised a clever system: butter indulgences. For a fee, you could pay the church for permission to keep butter in your diet during fasting seasons. This compromise kept people happy, preserved tradition, and conveniently filled church coffers. It shows just how much butter meant to the French avant faith had to adapt to its pull by the 19th century. Butter production in France had reached new heights, especially in Normandy, a region that remains legendary for its dairy products. Normandy's mild climate, lush green fields, and rolling pastures created the perfect conditions for raising dairy cows. Farmers there had been perfecting their craft for generations, focusing on quality over quantity. With the spread of railroads, this regional butter could finally reach Paris and beyond, cementing its reputation as the finest in Europe. Soon, French butter wasn't just a regional specialty, it was an international standard of excellence, sought after in kitchens across the continent. But what makes French butter today so consistently superior? It all starts with the milk. Unlike industrial dairy systems that confine cows indoors, French dairy farming, especially in Normandy, Brittany, and the Loire Valley, relies on open pastures. Cows graze freely on fields filled with grasses, clover, and wildflowers, giving the milk layers of subtle flavor. Their diet changes with the seasons. In spring, tender new grasses lend a lighter, fresher taste, while in autumn, more mature plants bring out richness and depth. This seasonal rhythm means French butter isn't a one-note product, it evolves with the land, reflecting the cycles of nature. Farmers also care deeply for their herds, often using traditional grazing methods like rotating cows across fields. So the soil stays healthy and the animals always have access to fresh, nutrient-rich grass. This attention to detail ensures milk that's clean, flavorful, and naturally higher in fat. Setting the stage for world-class butter. Once collected, the milk must be handled with precision. Freshness is key, and dairies in France collect milk daily, transporting it in temperature-controlled tanks to processing facilities. There, it undergoes rigorous testing to confirm quality before being separated into cream and skim milk. In earlier times, cream separation relied on gravity, with milk left to sit until the cream rose to the top. Today, modern centrifuges make the process faster and more efficient. But the principle remains the same. Only the richest, purest cream will become butter. And nothing goes to waste. The leftover skim milk is often used for yogurt, cheese, or sold as low-fat milk. The next step, and one of the secrets to French butter's unique taste, is ripening the cream. This process introduces beneficial bacteria that ferment the lactose, transforming it into lactic acid. The result is a tangy, slightly zesty undertone that sets French butter apart from the mild flavor of most American butters. Ripening usually lasts anywhere from 12 to 48 hours, depending on the style, and requires precise temperature control. Too warm, and the flavor becomes overly sour. Too cold, and the cream won't ferment properly. But when done right, ripening creates that perfect balance of richness and tang that bakers and chefs prize. It's the reason a simple French butter can taste like more than just butter, can taste alive, with layers of complexity. After ripening comes churning, the most dramatic step in butter making. This is the moment cream is transformed into butter. For centuries, this was done by hand in wooden churns, with farmers rhythmically shaking and turning cream until solid fat clumped together. Today, large dairies rely on machines that churn faster and more efficiently, though small, artisanal producers still keep the tradition alive. During churning, the butterfat separates from the liquid buttermilk, slowly thickening into solid golden butter. That leftover buttermilk isn't wasted, can be used for pancakes, baked goods, or even refreshing drinks. Once the butter is formed, it's washed with cold water to remove lingering buttermilk, which could cause spoilage. This washing step is crucial to ensure a clean, pure flavor and a longer shelf life. From here, the butter is kneaded, a process that evens out the texture, distributes the fat, and makes the butter smooth and spreadable. This kneading can also incorporate just the right amount of salt, depending on the style of butter being made. Salted butter has long been a favorite in Brittany, where coastal access historically provided abundant sea salt, while unsalted butter, prized by bakers, allows more control in recipes. The choice between salted and unsalted is more than preference. It reflects regional traditions and culinary purposes. And in France, both styles have their loyal fans. Every detail, from pasture to packaging, affects the final flavor. The cow's diet, the cream's ripening, the speed of the churn. The length of the needle of it adds up to butter that doesn't just taste rich, but tastes distinctly French. That's why French butter holds a protected status in some regions, much like Champagne or Roquefort cheese. Certain butters, such as Beurre Designy from Normandy, carry an official designation of origin, ensuring that only butter made in specific areas with traditional methods can carry the name. For consumers, this means authenticity and trust. When you buy French butter with such a label, you're tasting history, terroir, and craftsmanship in every bite. But beyond history and tradition, French butter continues to thrive because it delivers something people crave: flavor and quality. In the U.S., chefs and home bakers alike seek it out, often paying a premium for imported blocks. Why? Because once you've tasted a croissant made with French butter, or spread it on warm bread, it's hard to go back to ordinary butter. Its higher fat content makes it perfect for baking, while its fermented temps brings depth to even the simplest dishes. Whether you're making a batch of cookies, whipping up mashed potatoes, or just enjoying a slice of toast, French butter elevates the experience from ordinary to extraordinary. Imagine this: A warm baguette just pulled from the oven, the crust still crackling as you break it apart. You take a knife, scoop up a generous curl of golden butter, and let it melt slowly across the bread's surface. That creamy, salty richness doesn't just taste good, tastes unforgettable. This is the magic of French butter, a food so deeply tied to tradition and craftsmanship that every bite feels like a celebration of centuries-old know-how. For many people in the United States, butter is a staple, but French butter has an almost legendary reputation. Richer, creamier, and more flavorful, it represents the gold standard of dairy. But what exactly makes it so special? How is it produced, packaged, and protected so carefully that it retains its signature taste and texture from the farms of Normandy to kitchens across the world? Let's take a journey inside the world of French butter making, and you'll soon see why this timeless dairy product remains one of the most beloved. Ingredients in global cuisine. The process begins with one simple ingredient: milk. But this isn't just any milk. French butter owes much of its magic to the dairy cows grazing on lush pastures in Normandy, Brittany, and other fertile regions of France. The cows are raised on natural diets, producing milk with a higher fat content that gives butter its luxurious creaminess. Once the milk is collected, the cream is carefully separated. In older times, this would have been done by hand, letting the cream rise naturally to the surface. But today's centrifuge machines make the process quicker and more precise. The quality of the cream matters tremendously in the foundation of the butter's texture, flavor, and golden color. From there, the cream undergoes fermentation, one of the most defining steps of French butter production. While much of the butter in the United States is made from sweet cream, French butter often goes through a cultured process. This means the cream is left to ferment with lactic cultures for several hours, developing tangy, nutty notes that give French butter its depth of flavor. It's a small detail, but one that dramatically changes the experience. When you spread cultured butter on warm bread or use it in baking, you can immediately taste the difference. It's richer, more aromatic, and distinctly French. The cream is then churned, a moment where liquid transforms into something extraordinary. Traditionally, this was done by hand, with wooden churns rhythmically turning cream into butter. Today, modern machines handle this task with remarkable speed, but the principle is the same. Churning agitates the cream, breaking the fat molecules, and separating the buttermilk from the butterfat. What emerges is a pale, soft mass that's just beginning to resemble the butter we know and love. At this stage, the butter is incredibly delicate and still carries extra water and buttermilk that must be removed to ensure perfect consistency. This is where kneading comes in, a crucial step often overlooked but absolutely essential. In the past, kneading was performed by hand, with artisans gently pressing and folding the butter to squeeze out excess moisture. Today, modern butter factories use machines to achieve the same effect more efficiently. But the goal hasn't changed: to strike the perfect balance. If butter contains too much water, it becomes oily and loses its richness. If it's overworked and dried out, it turns hard and impossible to spread. The kneading process ensures the butter is smooth, creamy, and spreadable, with just the right amount of moisture locked in. This careful attention is what makes French butter such a joy to use in everything from croissants to sauces to simple toast. Of course, flavor matters just as much as texture, and in France, salting butter is more than a culinary choice, it's a cultural tradition. While unsalted butter is available, many French varieties are lightly salted, adding complexity and a subtle savoriness. On average, French salted butter contains around 2% to 3% salt, though the amount varies by region and taste. Brittany, in particular, is famous for its boldly salted butters, where some producers even use fleur de sel, the delicate hand-harvested sea salt crystals that bring an added touch of luxury. This isn't just about taste either. Salt also acts as a natural preservative, extending the butter's shelf life without the need for artificial additives. The result is a product that's not only delicious, but also more resilient, a key reason why French salted butter has remained so popular across centuries. Once the butter is perfected, it moves to packaging, the step that protects its delicate flavor and texture on its journey to consumers. Large factories typically use plastic tubs or waxed paper for convenience, cost efficiency, and airtight sealing. However, plastic has one drawback: it can trap moisture, sometimes altering texture. Smaller artisanal producers often prefer parchment or foil, which allow the butter to breathe while still shielding it from light and air, to elements that can quickly spoil dairy. It's a small but meaningful difference, one that reflects the artisanal mindset, preserving butter in a way that respects its natural qualities. Storage is equally critical. French butter, with its higher fat content and artisanal fermentation, spoils faster than mass-produced butter if not handled correctly. It needs to be kept at a steady, cool temperature between 32 degrees Fahrenheit and 39 degrees Fahrenheit. Too warm, and it softens, becoming greasy and unspreadable. Too cold, and it turns rock hard, difficult to use. Industrial producers rely on massive refrigeration systems, equipped with humidity controls and sensors to ensure butter stays at its ideal consistency. Smaller producers may use simpler refrigerators, but still pay close attention to temperature, checking it often to guarantee the butter retains its prized creaminess. After all, no matter how perfect the butter is when it leaves the churn, mishandling during storage can undo all that hard work. The next challenge? Transportation. Butter is notoriously sensitive to changes in temperature, making logistics a serious concern. From the moment it leaves the factory, it must travel in refrigerated trucks or climate-controlled containers. Even a short lapse in cold chain logistics can compromise its texture and flavor. Small producers often distribute directly to local markets, bakeries, and specialty stores, keeping travel distances short and ensuring customers receive butter that tastes incredibly fresh. Larger producers, on the other hand, navigate complex networks, sending butter across the country or even overseas. To do this successfully, they rely on advanced cold chain systems that maintain precise temperatures across trucks, shipping containers, and warehouses. Whether the butter ends up in a neighborhood bakery in Paris or a supermarket in New York City, the goal is the same: to preserve that iconic creamy texture and unmistakable taste. What sets French butter apart even more than its technical precision is its devotion to tradition. Many producers, particularly smaller artisanal farms, still follow centuries-old methods, valuing fermentation, careful churning, and hand kneading. While industrial butter has its place, there's something about the artisanal approach that can't be replicated in mass production. The result is a butter that's more than an ingredient, it's a cultural emblem tied to France's culinary identity. Each region adds its own touch, from the bold salted butters of Brittany to the milder unsalted varieties of Normandy. For chefs and home cooks alike, these distinctions matter. French butter isn't just spread on bread. It elevates pastries, enriches sauces, and forms the base of countless iconic dishes. This devotion to quality hasn't gone unnoticed. Around the world, French butter has become a symbol of luxury, often compared to fine wine or artisanal cheese. In American kitchens, it's seen as a premium product, one that bakers and chefs reach for when they want to take their creations to the next level. Croissants made with French butter have that delicate flakiness Americans crave. A simple steak finished with a pat of cultured butter takes on a new depth of flavor. Even something as humble as popcorn becomes gourmet when drizzled with melted French butter. It's proof that small details can transform everyday foods into extraordinary experiences. Of course, the French butter story is not just about taste. It's about heritage, craftsmanship, and attention to detail. From the cows grazing in open pastures to the hands that knead and shape the butter. Every step of the process reflects a respect for nature and tradition. Even with the introduction of modern technology, many butter makers remain fiercely protective of their artisanal practices, understanding that what makes their product exceptional cannot be rushed or compromised. This is why, despite globalization and mass production, French butter continues to stand out in a crowded market. It remains not just a food, but a cultural treasure, one that represents the heart of French gastronomy. And so, when you spread a pat of golden French butter across a warm piece of bread or fold it into a batch of cookies, you're tasting more than dare you're tasting history. You're experiencing the culmination of centuries of knowledge, perfected through tradition and preserved with passion. That's why French butter has remained a timeless favorite for generations. Loved across the globe and cherished in kitchens from Paris to New York. Now the question is, how do you like to enjoy it? Do you savor it on a fresh baguette with a pinch of salt, melt it over sizzling vegetables, or use it to bake pastries that fill your home with the smell of butter and sugar? However you enjoy it, one thing is certain: French butter isn't just food, it's an experience. And once you've had a taste, it's nearly impossible to go back to anything less. So the next time you reach for butter, take a moment to appreciate the journey. It's been on from lush French pastures to your kitchen table. That golden square of creaminess represents centuries of craftsmanship, an unbroken chain of tradition, and the promise of flavor that transforms even the simplest meal into something memorable. French butter is, quite simply, the gold standard of dairy, and once you've tasted it, you'll understand why it continues to hold its place as one of the most beloved foods in the world.